Today is the end of a very short series we've done called The King to a Cross. Matthew 21 says, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there, with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went ahead of him and those that follow shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? The crowds answered, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. This is the scene of Jesus entering Jerusalem. It's something we celebrate every Palm Sunday. Now, okay, I grew up in the country, but I'm more of a city boy than a country boy. And I don't know, I'm certain of this, I've never ridden a donkey. Never ridden a donkey. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I've ever personally witnessed anyone else riding a donkey. There's one. Now, here's the thing. To date myself, I grew up watching the Brady Bunch. And there's a famous, one of their 2-part episodes where they rode donkeys down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And as a kid, I thought that was the height of childhood adventure. My entire childhood, I wanted to ride a donkey to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Not so much anymore. I don't think I will do that. But I've watched a lot of Westerns. I've seen people riding donkeys on Westerns. I'm from Indiana, and Indiana is a huge basketball state where donkey basketball is a thing. It's a thing here too. It's not really my thing, so I've never attended one, and I've seen clips on TV, but I don't know if I've ever witnessed anyone riding a donkey. Okay, we have at least one person who's ridden a donkey. Who else here has ridden a donkey? Okay, I figured Brian. Brenda, have you ridden a donkey? Oh. Okay. Okay, now, okay, how many would say that riding a donkey has ever been a regular part of your existence? Or you've been around a lot of donkeys and people riding donkeys? Or was it a special thing? Okay, nobody has had regular donkey experience. Is that what you're telling me? Okay, another question. How many of you have ever spread your cloak on the ground for someone else to walk across? Chivalry is dead. No. Okay, how many of you have ever worn a cloak? We've got a few cloak wearers. Yeah, I mean, maybe it was in a church play, maybe you were in some sort of theater production, maybe at Halloween, maybe you went to a Ren Fair and the cloak was part of your costume, your Ren Fair costume. Now, okay, it goes without saying that cloaks are cool, but they're not mainstream. They're not mainstream enough that you see a lot of people walking around wearing cloaks. So regular exposure to donkeys and cloak wearing is not too common for us. But we read this passage every Palm Sunday, so we're familiar with this passage. But the reality is most of us are not that familiar with some of the things in the passage, even things that are most familiar to us. I mean, everyone here knows what donkeys are. Everyone here knows what cloaks are, but they're not a common part of our world for most of us. Now, in first century Palestine, donkeys and cloaks were very common. But the scene we just read was not that common. Not common, but yet everyone understood the significance of what was going on. Week before last, I was sitting, scrolling Facebook on my phone, and our friends back in Indiana from our former home of Carmel, Indiana, were posting words like sirens and basement, storm, I knew it was a tornado warning without anyone needing to say the word tornado. Because when you live in tornado country, you know the signs. And there was a touchdown in Carmel, Indiana. Tornado touchdowns are not that common, but everyone throughout Indiana knows the signs. Dark storm clouds, sirens, watches and warnings. And in our passage, they knew that the promised king of Judah and Israel was entering the capital city the moment that Jesus got on that donkey. The moment he got on that donkey, it was more than just a ride. It was a significant ride. It was a sign of Davidic royalty. He was a king descended from David, entering David's city, claiming that he was indeed the king that the prophets foretold of. And what did they do? They responded appropriately. They spread their cloaks and cut branches and laid them across his path. See, this was a significant sign. That's what you did. This was an act of royal homage. That's what you did when a king entered the city. Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Now, Hosanna is a word of adoration and praise. And they declared that he was the Son of David. He was the promised king descended from David. And they shouted that he came in the name of the Lord. They were saying, this is the promised Messiah. And when asked, they also described him as the prophet. Jesus was all those things. He was someone significant and special. This was not an ordinary day. This was a significant and special moment, a parousia, the entrance of a king. And their praise and their excitement, came from the overflow, the expression of an entire life's hope. The fulfillment of the words of the prophets. These were people who lived in persecution and trial and tough circumstances. And the promised king, the promised Messiah, was headed toward the capital city, a city that was no longer under Judean rule. It was under pagan Roman rule. And here was their king coming to take his rightful place as the ruler of the land and liberate them from the shackles of Rome. Or so they presupposed. See, they were a culture embedded in certain presuppositions concerning the foretold Messiah king. We make presuppositions and presumptions and assumptions all the time, right? Now, if you bring brownies to the party, what party? I don't know. The next one we have. If you bring brownies to a party, you might assume you'll leave with an empty plate because brownies are a really popular dessert. So you might assume that you'll leave with an empty plate. But a presumption is more that you know the plate will be clear of brownies. A presupposition would say, I know I'm going to leave with an empty plate because I have the firm belief that everyone loves brownies. It's more like a core belief, presupposition that everyone loves brownies. But the fact is, I really don't like brownies. I really don't care for brownies. And I know I'm not alone. There are other outliers. I've met them. And when sometimes people find out that I don't like brownies, they're like, how could you not like brownies? Brownies are the best. And then I might mention my least favorite part of the brownie is what many people think is the best part of the brownie. The edges. They make brownie pans where every piece is an edge piece. That's terrible. If I'm going to eat a brownie, that means, first of all, it's, I'll eat one, but it's like down at the bottom of my list of desserts. So if I'm going to eat a brownie, first it means it's the only dessert option. And secondly, I want the middle. And there's nobody fighting me for it. No, the people who shouted Hosanna that day had a presupposition about the Messiah King. Even though so many of the things that Jesus said and didn't match up with those presuppositions. They saw Jesus mounting a donkey, and they made the connection to King David. King David, that conjured up images of victorious battles, the establishment of Jerusalem as their capital. What their presuppositions blinded them from seeing was that donkeys are also a sign of peace and humility. I mean, they saw his miraculous powers that he used to heal people. Power to overthrow enemies. But they were kind of deaf to his commands to love their enemies. Deaf to the warnings that he was headed to Jerusalem to be betrayed and crucified. They were operating based on their presuppositions rather than the reality that was before them. And before we blame them, be aware that no one is above making presuppositions. I remember the moment where I became aware of one of my own presuppositions. Back in Indiana, where I'm from, I knew one single person of Native American descent. One. And she was raised in California in a Hispanic community because she was half Hispanic. So my first Sunday when I was on staff at New Hope Church in Williston, my executive pastor introduced me to a lady who had some questions. And she told me that she had been raised traditional. Now I knew what that meant. Traditional? It means the King James Bible. It means hymns. It means men with short hair, above the ears, right? A shirt and tie when you go to church. Women in dresses who know their place. Old grumpy people who don't like change. I had a lot to say about that. But that's not what she meant at all. She was indigenous and she had questions about burning sage and other practices of her people. And she was trying to reconcile some of those traditions with following Jesus. And I went from having a lot to say about tradition based upon my presupposition to having very little to say. I did a whole lot more listening and learning than I did teaching. So have you ever made a presupposition? Or has anyone ever made a presumption on you? Now, some of you know I like to treasure hunt at garage sales. There we go. And I was at one a year or two ago. And there was an older woman there. There was an older white woman there. It said something to me that was just blatantly racist. I mean, just blatantly racist. And I think there must have been a presumption that my white skin would be okay with the thing that she said. And there's no doubt been times in her life where she was openly able to say the thing that she said. So she presupposed I would be okay with it. And I was shocked. I was not okay with it. And something rare for me, I was speechless. But I did make this face. And I think maybe it spoke something. Okay, one more example, and it's kind of a funny one. Sam, my daughter, when she was living here with us, someone from work who's born and raised here said something about her accent. To which she had something in reply to say about their accent. To which they declared, I don't have an accent. And she was like, of course you do. They insisted. They spoke normal English. Everyone else has accents. As if the English language originated here and hasn't evolved. Their presupposition stems from growing up around in a culture where most people have the same accent as they have, thinking this is regular English. Oh, you betcha. And, all of us to a degree are like fish in water. We're unaware of the water. We've just always been in it. So when all you've heard about the Messiah King is that he would arrive in a sudden and violent might to overthrow your earthly enemies, not even that Messiah King could convince you otherwise. His closest friends wouldn't understand until he had been crucified and resurrected. We have presuppositions about Jesus as well. We might have presuppositions he likes our political party best. We might have presuppositions he agrees with our economic policies or trade policies. Maybe he has presuppositions that maybe we have presuppositions he likes our form of government in general. Presuppositions that he likes our country best out of all the countries. Okay, well, we're number 2 next to Israel. But guess what won't even exist when Jesus returns? When Jesus returns and the kingdom of God takes over the world, guess what won't exist? Any of the stuff I just mentioned. Political parties. There won't be political parties. Economics, money for that matter. I mean, maybe our currency will be generosity rather than accumulation. Countries, the only government that will exist will be His. The only territory His. And there will be no borders separating us. In fact, it says that New Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem, its gates will be eternally open. Everything that will exist within this restored earth will be exactly how God wants it. It'll be His kingdom and His kingdom alone. And everybody there is going to be really happy about that. But we're not there yet, are we? We're not there yet. So how should we navigate life until His return? I think we see a clue of it in Matthew 22. It says, then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap Him in His words. They sent their disciples to Him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius. And he asked them, whose image is this? And whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, so give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Jesus reveals something here beyond the Pharisees' hypocrisy. He revealed that in the age in which we currently live, Caesars will exist. They will. Human governments will exist. For good or for bad or for everything in between. But because humans are imperfect, so will our governments be. So even though when we turn to Jesus, we become citizens of His kingdom, we still navigate in this imperfect world. We give to God what is God's and to this world what is of this world. Now, should we care about our imperfect world? Yes. Are such things important? Yes. But often I believe we mistake important for imperative. I know I sometimes mistake the important for the imperative. So we should handle the important matters of this world with care, with concern, steered by the wisdom and ethics of God's kingdom that we spoke about last week. We should be people who navigate life not only by praying, Lord, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's more than a prayer. That's a pledge. So the best we can in this imperfect system that we live in, we should be people who live out His kingdom come, His will be done as best we can. But if we're not careful, we tend to take the important earthly human stuff and make it the ultimate stuff. Human kingdoms are temporarily important. Human kingdoms have risen and fallen since human kingdoms have ever existed. They do not endure. But God's kingdom, eternally of ultimate importance, it alone is enduring, it alone is imperative. And I know that being comfortable with that is easier said than done. I know it's also not a new story. We see it in the history of Israel's kings. The prophet Samuel had led Israel as God had led him, but he was coming to the end of his life. And the people came to him and demanded a king, their first king. This disturbed Samuel. He prayed to the Lord. 1 Samuel 8, it says, and the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It's not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. The king's rights. Kings take. Kings take. Kings claim. They would take 10% of all produce and all their cattle and their livestock and they would take their sons and daughters into service. Basically, you would be their slaves. They would own you. But that's what they wanted. They wanted to be like all the other kingdoms and have a human king. So God gave Israel the king they wanted. Saul, he looked the part. He was tall and handsome, mighty at battle. But Saul became evil, wicked, and God rejected him. And God replaced Saul with the king God wanted, David. And David didn't look the part initially, but he became an even mightier warrior than Saul. And there were many kings that followed, a few good ones, most are bad. But they all did what you'd presume a king would do, a king of a kingdom. But Jesus came as a king, but not a mere human king. He came as a cosmic king, the King of Kings. He showed us how a king should be. So if Saul was the king that Israel wanted, and David was the king that God wanted for Israel at that time, Jesus is the cosmic king. The cosmic king that the human race and all of creation needed. And he didn't come to restore a human kingdom or overthrow human kingdoms. He came to bring God's kingdom near. He came to open passage that we might become citizens of God's kingdom. And he didn't accomplish this by bearing the sword. He did not accomplish this by shedding blood, the blood of his enemies. He did not do it by inflicting violence. He accomplished this by being inflicted, by surrendering to violence. This coming Friday is a day that we set to remember what Jesus suffered for us. Jesus did not do as human kings do. They presupposed their Messiah king would enter Jerusalem and claim the palace. But that's not where Jesus went when he entered the capital city. He did not enter a government building or the palace of a ruler. Instead, he entered the temple courts. Matthew 21 tells us that Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer. But you are making it a den of robbers. Sometimes when we want to justify making whips and turning over tables, we say, well, Jesus did it. We need to be careful. Jesus didn't protest the injustice of Rome. He protested the injustice of the house of God, the temple. And one day, Jesus will return and he'll cast out all injustice. New heavens and new earth. Heaven will come take over. But in the meantime, it's okay for us and it's good for us to try and reform Roman policy with the ethics of God's kingdom. But ultimately, that is Caesar's territory. What we should take greater care in doing is maintaining the faithfulness of God's kingdom within his temple. And his temple is no longer a building, a structure. His temple instead is the living organism known as the church, us collectively, those in Christ. And in doing that, will we model ourselves after human kings who conquer and control with might? Or will we model ourselves after the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who conquered and overcame with love, generosity, and self-sacrifice?